The rain hammered against the windows of Whitmore Cottage like 1,000 urgent fists. Inside the cramped drawing-room, Miss Clara Ashford sat alone by the dying fire, her shawl pulled tight against the autumn chill that crept through the walls. The clock on the mantel struck midnight, each chime echoing through the silent house like a funeral bell. She had grown accustomed to the sound. 3 years of midnight hours spent in this very chair, listening to the rain, watching the embers fade, waiting for sleep that rarely came. Her mother had passed 18 months ago, leaving Clara truly alone in the world, save for distant cousins who acknowledged her existence only in obligatory Christmas greetings. At 24, she was firmly established as a spinster, not by choice, but by circumstance. Her father, a country vicar, had left them with little upon his death. When Clara was only 17, her mother had taken in needlework to sustain them, and Clara had followed suit, her fingers growing calloused from endless hours of stitching for ladies who would never remember her face. She had no beauty to speak of, or so the mirror told her each morning. Plain brown hair, ordinary brown eyes, a face neither pretty nor offensive, merely unremarkable. The sort of face one passes in a crowd without a second glance. The sort of face that disappears. Clara reached for the letter on the table beside her, the correspondence from her cousin in Bath. It contained an offer of employment as a companion to an elderly widow, Mrs. Hargrove, who required assistance with correspondence and household management. The wages were modest, but it would be respectable work, and it would take her away from this cottage, where every corner held memories that cut like glass. She had already penned her acceptance. Tomorrow she would post it. Tomorrow she would begin the work of forgetting the life she had imagined for herself, the life that belonged to younger, prettier, wealthier girls. A sharp knock at the door startled her from these melancholy thoughts. Clara glanced at the clock. midnight. Who could possibly call at such an hour? The knock came again, more insistent. Rising on unsteady legs, Clara made her way through the darkened hallway to the front door. Rain roared beyond the wooden barrier. Through the small window she could discern only shadows. "Who is there?" she called, her voice barely audible above the storm. "A traveller seeking shelter," came a man's voice, deep and rough with cold. "My horse threw a shoe 1/2 mile hence. I saw your light." Clara hesitated. A woman alone, opening her door to a stranger at midnight. It was the height of foolishness. Yet something in the man's voice, a note of genuine desperation beneath the formal words, moved her to action. She drew back the bolt and opened the door. The man who stood upon her threshold was tall and broad-shouldered, rain streaming from his dark greatcoat and pooling at his boots. His hat obscured his features, but she could see the firm line of his jaw and the exhaustion evident in his posture. "Forgive the intrusion," he said, removing his hat to reveal a face that stopped Clara's breath in her throat. She knew this face. She had known it once, years ago, before time and circumstance had hardened its features and carved lines of weariness at the corners of his eyes. "Thomas," she whispered, the name emerging unbidden from memories she had locked away. The stranger's eyes widened in recognition. "Clara? Clara Ashford?" For a moment they simply stared at one another across the threshold, the rain falling between them like a curtain separating past from present. "Come in," she managed at last, stepping aside. "Before you catch your death." He entered with a murmur of thanks, water streaming from his clothing onto her modest floor. Clara closed the door against the storm and turned to face the man she had not seen in 7 years. The man she had loved since she was 17. Thomas Hartwell stood dripping in her narrow hallway, looking impossibly out of place in this small cottage. He had been tall even as a young man, but now he possessed the bearing of someone accustomed to command. His dark hair, once unruly, was cut in the fashionable style, and his clothing, though rain-soaked, was of the finest quality. "I did not know this was your home," he said, his voice carrying the cultured accent of London society. "The storm disoriented me. I thought I was approaching the village inn." "The inn lies another 2 miles north," Clara replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "You are in Whitmore, not Ashton." "Whitmore," he repeated, something flickering in his expression. "Then fate has led me here." Clara busied herself with practical matters to avoid meeting his gaze. "You must remove your coat. I shall fetch towels and stoke the fire." He obeyed, shrugging out of the heavy greatcoat and hanging it upon the peg by the door. Beneath he wore a tailored travelling suit that did nothing to disguise the powerful frame he had developed since their youth. In the drawing room, Clara coaxed the dying fire back to life, while Thomas stood near the hearth, his hands extended toward the warmth. The silence between them stretched, filled with questions neither seemed prepared to voice. "I had heard," Clara said carefully, focusing on the flames, "that you were in India these past 5 years, managing estates for the East India Company." "I was," he confirmed, "until 6 months ago, when family matters required my return to England." "I trust your family is well." A long pause. "My father passed this spring." Clara's hands stilled on the poker. "I am sorry for your loss." "Are you?" The question held no accusation, merely curiosity. "I thought you might have forgotten me entirely." She could not look at him. 7 years is a long time. "Indeed it is." His voice had grown softer, long enough for much to change. Clara rose, brushing ash from her hands with more attention than the task required. "I shall prepare tea." "You must be chilled to the bone." She fled to the kitchen before he could respond, her heart hammering against her ribs. 7 years since Thomas Hartwell had left Ashton to seek his fortune abroad. 7 years since she had watched him ride away without a backward glance, taking her foolish heart with him. They had been friends once, unlikely as it seemed now. He, the second son of the local gentry, educated and polished, with prospects and expectations. She, the vicar's plain daughter, with nothing to recommend her but a love of books and a talent for listening. He had sought her company during the summer he turned 22, newly returned from university and bored with the provincial society. They had walked the countryside together, discussing philosophy and poetry, debating the merits of Byron versus Wordsworth, laughing at shared jokes that made no sense to anyone else. She had fallen in love with him slowly, like ink spreading through water, until every part of her was colored by affection for Thomas Hartwell. And then, on a golden afternoon in late August, he had kissed her beneath the old oak tree at Hartwell Park. The memory burned, even now, his mouth on hers, tender and questioning, her heart exploding with joy. The whispered words against her lips, "Clara, my dear Clara." She had believed in that moment that he loved her too. But the next day, his father had announced Thomas's departure to India with the company, an opportunity too valuable to refuse. Connections that would secure his future. Thomas had come to say goodbye with regret in his eyes, but determination in his voice. "I must go, Clara. You understand. A man must make his way in the world." "Of course," she had replied, forcing a smile. "I wish you every success." He had taken her hand, pressed it briefly, and then he was gone. No promises, no declarations, no mention of that kiss beneath the oak tree. In the months that followed, she had waited for letters that never came. Eventually, she understood. It had been a moment of youthful folly for him. Nothing more. She was beneath his station, without beauty or fortune to recommend her. He would make his fortune abroad, and return to marry someone suitable. and she would remain in Ashton, stitching seams for ladies who would never see her as anything but common labour. Now, impossibly, he sat in her drawing room, larger than life, and more handsome than memory had painted him. Clara arranged cups on a tray with trembling hands. She had moved past this long ago. She had accepted her lot. Tomorrow she would leave for Bath and begin her life as a paid companion. Thomas Hartwell's unexpected return changed nothing. When she returned to the drawing room bearing the tea tray, she found him studying the small portrait that hung above the mantel, a likeness of her parents on their wedding day. "Your mother," he said quietly. "I heard of her passing. Please accept my belated condolences." "Thank you." Clara set the tray upon the table and poured with careful precision. She bore her illness with grace. Thomas accepted the cup she offered, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact sent an unwelcome warmth through her veins. "And you have remained here alone?" he asked, settling into the chair opposite hers. There was nowhere else to go. She kept her tone even, matter of fact. "Until recently, I have accepted a position in Bath as companion to a Mrs. Hargrove. I leave tomorrow." Something flickered across his features. Surprise? Disappointment? She could not name it. "Tomorrow," he repeated. "So soon?" "The position is advantageous. Mrs. Hargrove is elderly but kind. Also, my cousin assures me it will be respectable employment." "I see." He set his cup down with deliberate care. "Clara, there is something I must tell you. My presence here tonight is not entirely the accident I claimed." Her heart stuttered. "I do not understand." Thomas rose and crossed to his coat, still dripping near the door. From an inner pocket, he withdrew an envelope, its seal already broken. "This arrived at my estate 3 days ago," he said, returning to her side. "It was forwarded from my London address by my solicitor." He extended the letter toward her. Clara's hands shook as she accepted it, recognizing the fine paper and elegant script. She unfolded the single sheet and began to read. "My dearest Thomas, if you are reading this, then God has seen fit to reunite you with these words, and I may speak to you one final time across the boundary of death. I write this in the knowledge that my days are numbered. Consumption has claimed me as it claimed your mother before you, and I face the end with acceptance if not contentment. There is a matter that has weighed upon my conscience these 7 years, and I can no longer carry it into eternity without confession. On the day before your departure to India, you entrusted a letter to my care, requesting that I deliver it to Miss Clara Ashford of Whitmore. I did not deliver that letter, Thomas. I burned it instead. May God forgive me. Your father had made his wishes clear. You were to make your fortune abroad and return to marry well, securing the family's interests. A connection with the vicar's daughter would have been most unsuitable. When you gave me that letter, I knew it contained sentiments that would complicate matters. I believed I acted in your best interest, protecting you from a youthful attachment that would fade with time and distance. I was wrong. I have watched you these 6 months since your return, seen the shadow that haunts your eyes, heard you speak her name in your sleep. The fortune you made in India means nothing if it cost you happiness. I destroyed something precious, and for that I am truly sorry. The letter is gone, its words lost forever. But I can tell you this, Clara Ashford still resides in Whitmore Cottage, alone since her mother's passing. She never married. I have made inquiries through mutual acquaintances. They say she keeps to herself, takes in needlework, and has accepted a position as companion to a widow in Bath. If there remains even a fragment of the love you felt for her 7 years ago, do not let my mistake cost you both a lifetime of regret. Go to her, Thomas. Tell her what I prevented you from saying then. Perhaps it is not too late. Your loving godmother, Eleanor Hartwell. The letter fell from Clara's nerveless fingers. You wrote to me, she whispered. 7 years ago, you wrote to me. Thomas knelt before her chair, his eyes searching her face. I wrote to tell you that I loved you, that I would work every day in India to build a future worthy of you, that I would return as soon as I had made my fortune, and ask for your hand properly, with the means to provide for you. Clara's vision blurred with tears. I thought you had forgotten me, that the kiss beneath the oak tree meant nothing. It meant everything, he said, his voice raw with emotion. Every moment since has been measured against that afternoon. Every achievement in India was hollow because you were not there to share it. I returned to England 6 months ago, a wealthy man, prepared to beg your forgiveness for the years of silence, only to learn of your mother's death and your impending departure for Bath. But your godmother's letter, Clara managed. She only just passed. Last week, Thomas reached for her hands, holding them as if they were the most precious things in the world. When I received her confession, I could not believe that after all this time, all these wasted years, there might still be a chance. I set out immediately for Whitmore, but the storm delayed me. When I knocked upon your door tonight and you opened it, I thought perhaps God had granted me mercy I did not deserve. Clara looked down at their joined hands, his large and warm, hers small and trembling. I waited for you, she admitted, the words emerging broken. For months after you left, I watched the road, hoping, when no word came, I told myself to forget, but I never did. I never could. Clara. He raised her hands to his lips, pressing kisses to her knuckles. I have been searching for you since the moment I left. I simply did not know where to look. My godmother's letter gave me a map back to you. She met his eyes then, seeing in them the young man she had loved beneath the oak tree, but also something deeper, forged by years and distance and longing. Tomorrow I was to leave, she said. Tomorrow I was to begin forgetting. Then let tomorrow begin something else instead. Thomas replied. Let it begin the life we should have had 7 years ago. Marry me, Clara. Not because I have made my fortune, not to save you from a lonely future. Marry me because I have loved you since that summer when we walked the countryside together, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond. The rain had gentled to a soft patter against the windows. The fire crackled warmly in the hearth, and in the small drawing-room of Whitmore Cottage, Clara Ashford finally allowed herself to believe in miracles. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Thomas drew her from the chair and into his arms, holding her as if she might disappear. His embrace was everything she remembered, and more, safety and passion and homecoming, all at once. When he pulled back to look at her face, his expression held wonder. All these years, I thought you would have moved on, found someone else, built a life without me. How could I? Clara asked simply. You took my heart with you to India. I have merely been waiting for you to bring it home. He kissed her then, not the tentative kiss of youth beneath the oak tree, but the sure kiss of a man who had crossed oceans and weathered years for this moment. Clara melted into him, her hands rising to frame his face, feeling the reality of him beneath her palms. When they finally parted, both breathless, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. I have a confession of my own, he murmured. The storm did not merely delay me. When I reached the village of Ashton and learned you were here in Whitmore, I hesitated. I lost my courage. Clara pulled back slightly to meet his eyes. You lose courage? I convinced myself you would have forgotten me, that I was a fool to believe your feelings could have survived 7 years of silence. I nearly turned back. He smiled ruefully. Then my horse threw a shoe. And suddenly I had no choice but to continue. I think perhaps my godmother arranged matters from beyond, ensuring I would not lose my nerve again. Or perhaps, Clara suggested, her heart full to bursting, fate simply knew we belonged together. The remainder of the night passed in conversation, 7 years of stories and experiences shared between two souls finally reunited. Thomas spoke of India, of heat and spices and ancient temples, of fortunes made in tea and silk, of nights spent beneath foreign stars, thinking of an English garden and a girl with ordinary brown eyes that held his entire world. Clara spoke of quieter years, of her mother's decline and death, of needlework by candlelight and long walks through countryside that reminded her constantly of afternoons spent with him, of the loneliness that had become her constant companion. No more loneliness, Thomas promised, pulling her close. Never again. As dawn broke grey and gentle over Whitmore, they sat together before the fire, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. The rain had stopped entirely, leaving the world washed clean and new. "I should call upon Reverend Matthews today," Thomas said, his voice rumbling beneath her ear, "to arrange the banns." "Reverend Matthews," Clara murmured. "He will be astonished. The entire village will be astonished." Plain Clara Ashford, marrying the wealthy Mr. Hartwell. Thomas tilted her chin up, his expression fierce. "You are not plain. You never were. You are the most beautiful woman I have ever known. Because you are beautiful here." He touched her temple gently. "And here." His fingers moved to rest above her heart. Tears pricked Clara's eyes. "I am not accustomed to such compliments." "Then you shall grow accustomed quickly, for I intend to offer them daily for the rest of our lives." A knock at the door interrupted this tender moment. Clara rose reluctantly, smoothing her rumpled dress with a self-conscious gesture. "That will be Mrs. Dawson from next door. She often brings fresh bread on Sunday mornings." Indeed, when Clara opened the door, she found her elderly neighbor standing on the threshold with a cloth-covered basket. Mrs. Dawson's eyes widened comically at the sight of the gentleman's greatcoat hanging in the hallway, still damp from the storm. "Miss Ashford," the old woman said with barely concealed delight at this unexpected scandal, "I do hope everything is well. I heard voices during the night." "Quite well, Mrs. Dawson," Clara replied with perfect composure. "May I introduce Mr. Thomas Hartwell? He sought shelter from the storm last evening. His horse threw a shoe." Thomas appeared in the hallway at that moment, looking entirely too handsome, despite his rumpled state. He bowed with practiced elegance. "Mrs. Dawson, a pleasure to make your acquaintance." The old woman's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment before she recovered. "Mr. Hartwell. Of course. I remember your family. Hartwell Park, not 2 miles distant. You went to India, did you not?" "I did indeed, ma'am, and have only recently returned." Thomas's hand found Clara's shoulder in a gesture of unmistakable possession, "with the intention of asking Miss Ashford to become my wife." Mrs. Dawson's basket dropped from her nerveless fingers, sending bread rolls scattering across the threshold. "Your wife," she managed faintly. "With her permission, of course," Thomas added with a smile, "which she has graciously granted." The old woman looked between them, taking in Clara's radiant face and Thomas's protective stance. Then, to Clara's surprise, Mrs. Dawson's stern features softened into a genuine smile. "Well," she declared, bending to retrieve her scattered bread, "it's about time someone saw sense. I always said Miss Ashford deserved better than needlework and loneliness. Welcome home, Mr. Hartwell. You've chosen well." News of the engagement spread through Whitmore and the neighboring villages with the speed of summer lightning. By afternoon, Clara had received no fewer than 7 callers, all curious to see the mysterious Mr. Hartwell, who had appeared from India to claim the spinster nobody had thought to notice. Thomas bore their scrutiny with patient good humor, playing the role of devoted suitor with such natural warmth that Clara half believed he had been practicing for years, which she supposed he had been. On the third day following his arrival, they walked together to Hartwell Park, where Thomas had been born and raised. The great house stood silent and shuttered, awaiting its new master's permanent residence. They entered through the servants' entrance, Thomas having dismissed most of the staff until he was ready to resume full occupation. "It needs a mistress," he observed as they walked through dusty rooms filled with Holland-covered furniture. It has been too long without life and laughter. Clara could envision it, these grand rooms filled with warmth and purpose, children playing in the nursery, summer parties on the lawn, everything she had never dared dream of. They made their way to the gardens, overgrown but still possessing a wild beauty, and there, ancient and unmovable, stood the oak tree. Their oak tree. Thomas led her to stand beneath its spreading branches, now golden with autumn's touch. "7 years ago," he said softly, "I kissed you here and failed to say the words that mattered most." "You were young," Clara replied, her hand in his. "We both were. Youth is no excuse for cowardice." He turned to face her fully, his expression solemn. "I love you, Clara Ashford. I have loved you since you argued with me about the merits of Keats versus Shelley. I loved you when I boarded the ship to India. I loved you through every mile of separation. I loved you through years of silence and misunderstanding. And I will love you through every tomorrow God grants us." Clara's vision blurred with tears of joy. "I love you, Thomas Hartwell. I have loved you since you first asked my opinion on a matter of philosophy as if my thoughts truly mattered. I loved you when you left. I loved you through the pain of your silence, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." He kissed her then, beneath the tree that had witnessed their beginning, sealing with that kiss the promise of all their tomorrows. When they finally drew apart, both laughing through happy tears, Clara noticed something carved into the tree's trunk that she had not seen before. She approached, tracing the letters with wondering fingers. "Th. August, you carved this," she whispered. "The day you kissed me?" "I did." Thomas stood behind her, his arms encircling her waist. "I wanted to mark the moment when my life truly began. I knew even then that you were my future, Clara. I simply lacked the courage to claim it. And now I have more courage than sense, thanks to a godmother's deathbed confession and a providential storm." He rested his chin atop her head. "Now I have everything." 3 weeks later, on a crisp November morning, Clara Ashford walked down the aisle of Ashton Parish Church on the arm of her distant cousin, who had travelled from Bath for the occasion. The church was filled with curious villagers, all eager to witness the unexpected wedding of the year. But Clara saw only Thomas, waiting for her at the altar with an expression of such overwhelming love that her step faltered with the force of it. He reached for her hand as she approached, his fingers warm and sure around hers. "You are beautiful," he whispered as the Reverend began the ceremony. She thought of all the years she had believed herself plain and forgettable, all the lonely nights in Whitmore Cottage, all the dreams she had carefully packed away, and she realized that sometimes the miracle is not in changing who you are, but in finding someone who has been searching for exactly you all along. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Matthews declared with satisfaction. Thomas pulled Clara into his arms and kissed her with such thorough devotion that several ladies in the front pews fanned themselves vigorously. When they emerged from the church into the watery November sunshine, Clara wearing her mother's pearl necklace and Thomas's ring upon her finger, they were greeted with applause and well wishes. Mrs. Dawson pressed a lace handkerchief into Clara's hand. "For happy tears," she said gruffly. though I dare say you'll have plenty of those ahead." "Thank you," Clara replied, embracing the old woman who had been her only friend during the lonely years, "for the bread, for your kindness, for seeing me when others did not." "Foolish girl," Mrs. Dawson sniffed, dabbing at her own eyes. "I always saw you. We all did. We simply didn't know how to help. But Mr. Hartwell here, he knows what treasure he's claimed. Don't you, young man?" "Indeed I do," Thomas agreed, his arm secure around Clara's waist. "The greatest treasure in England." They spent their wedding night at Hartwell Park, in rooms that Clara had ordered prepared and filled with fresh flowers. As Thomas carried her over the threshold, Clara laughed with pure joy. "What amuses you, Mrs. Hartwell?" he asked, setting her gently upon her feet. "Mrs. Hartwell," she repeated wonderingly. "I never thought to hear that name applied to myself." "Get accustomed to it," Thomas advised, his fingers working at the buttons of her gown with admirable patience. "For you shall hear it daily, along with my love, my heart, and my reason for breathing." Clara's dress pulled at her feet, leaving her standing in her shift. She should have felt shy, exposed before this man she had loved for so long. Instead, she felt only rightness, as if this moment had been written in the stars since that summer when they were young. Thomas's touch was reverent as he gathered her close. "I have imagined this," he confessed against her hair. "Every night in India, I imagined holding you like this, loving you as a husband loves his wife." "Then imagine no longer," Clara whispered, reaching up to frame his face with her hands. "I am here, I am yours, and you are finally home." Their joining was tender and passionate by turns, years of longing finding expression in whispered words and gentle touches. When Clara cried out with pleasure, Thomas caught the sound with his mouth, drinking in her joy as if it were the finest wine. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, Clara's head pillowed on Thomas's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Tell me," she said softly, tracing patterns on his skin, "what you thought when you first saw me again, when I opened the door that night in the storm." Thomas caught her wandering hand and brought it to his lips. "I thought I was dreaming, that exhaustion and hope had conjured you from my imagination, and then you said my name, and I knew that either God was merciful or my godmother was conducting matters from heaven." He rolled onto his side to face her. "What did you think?" "I thought," Clara admitted, "that my heart, which I believed safely locked away, had escaped its cage and was beating wild and free for the first time in 7 years. I thought that you were more handsome than I remembered, and that I was still hopelessly, foolishly in love with you." "Not foolishly," Thomas corrected gently. "Never foolishly. You are the wisest woman I know, Clara Hartwell. For you loved a boy who left without explanation, and a man who returned begging forgiveness. That is not foolishness, that is grace." They talked deep into the night, making plans for their future. Thomas spoke of improvements to Hartwell Park, of opening the house for entertaining, of establishing himself as a permanent presence in the community. "And you?" he asked Clara, "what do you wish for?" She thought carefully before answering. "I wish to be useful. I have spent too many years existing without purpose beyond survival. I would like to establish a school, perhaps, for children whose families cannot afford tutors, to teach them to read and cipher, and to know that education is not solely for the wealthy." Thomas's expression filled with pride. "Then we shall establish a school on the Hartwell grounds. You shall direct it as you see fit, and I shall fund whatever you require." "You approve?" Clara asked, surprised by his immediate support. "Approve? My darling, I am in awe. You have spent years with nothing, yet your first thought as a wealthy man's wife is how to give to others." He kissed her forehead tenderly. "I knew I chose well, but I did not realize I had chosen a saint. Hardly a saint, Clara protested with a laugh. Simply someone who knows what it means to be overlooked and forgotten. I do not wish that fate for others. As dawn approached, painting the windows with soft light, Clara reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. 1 week ago, she had been preparing to leave for Bath, to spend her days reading to an elderly woman and managing household accounts. Now she lay in the arms of the man she loved, mistress of a great house, with the freedom to pursue dreams she had never dared voice. "Thomas?" she murmured, as sleep began to claim her. "Hmm?" His voice was drowsy, content. "Your godmother's letter, the one that arrived at midnight and brought you to my door. Do you still have it?" "I do." "Why?" Clara smiled against his chest. "I should like to keep it, to remember that even when all seems lost, even when years have passed and hope has faded, love has a way of finding its path home." Thomas's arms tightened around her. "Then it is yours, my love, along with everything else I possess." "I need nothing else," Clara whispered. "Only you." In the months and years that followed, Clara and Thomas became known throughout the county for their devotion to each other and their generosity to the community. The Hartwell School opened its doors to students regardless of their family's means, with Clara herself teaching several classes each week. Thomas's fortune from India was put to good use, improving tenant cottages and establishing programs for those in need. But more than their charitable works, it was the evidence of their deep love that captured the imagination of all who knew them. They were often seen walking hand in hand through Hartwell Park, or sitting beneath the old oak tree, talking and laughing like young lovers. At assemblies and dinners, Thomas's gaze never strayed far from his wife, and Clara's face glowed with happiness whenever he entered a room. "Some people are simply meant to be together," Mrs. Dawson declared to anyone who would listen. Like Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, 7 years apart couldn't break what was meant to be. On the anniversary of that fateful midnight when Thomas had knocked upon Clara's door, they sat together in the drawing-room of Whitmore Cottage, which they had kept as a retreat from the grandeur of Hartwell Park. "Do you remember what you thought when you opened the door that night?" Thomas asked, pulling Clara onto his lap in a manner most improper for a respectable married couple. "I thought you were a stranger seeking shelter," Clara replied, twining her arms around his neck. "I did not dare believe you could be real." "And now?" His lips found the sensitive spot below her ear. "You believe I am real now, Mrs. Hartwell?" "Now," Clara said, pulling back to meet his eyes, "I believe that miracles happen, that letters arrive at midnight bearing impossible news, that love survives years and distance, that plain girls can find extraordinary happiness. I believe it all because I am living it." Thomas's expression grew serious. "You were never plain, Clara. You were simply waiting to be truly seen. And I thank God and my godmother's conscience that I was granted the chance to see you, to love you, to build a life with you." Their kiss was interrupted by a knock at the door, and they broke apart laughing like guilty children. "That will be the students," Clara said, straightening her dress. "I promised to review their compositions this evening." "Ever the devoted teacher," Thomas observed with mock resignation. "Very well, I shall content myself with stolen kisses between pupils." Clara opened the door to admit 3 young girls from the village, their arms laden with papers and their faces eager. As they settled around the drawing-room table, Thomas watched his wife transform into the patient educator she had become, guiding young minds with the same care and attention he had fallen in love with 7 years ago. When the girls had departed with praise for their efforts and gentle corrections where needed, Clara returned to Thomas's embrace. "Happy?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Beyond measure," she replied. "Every day with you is more than I ever dreamed possible." Outside the cottage windows, Rain began to fall once more, drumming against the glass like it had that first night. But this time the sound brought no loneliness, no melancholy thoughts of what might have been. This time it brought only the comfort of being home, being loved, being exactly where she belonged. "Tell me again," Clara murmured, nestled against Thomas's chest, "about the letter that brought you back to me." "My godmother wrote that she could not face eternity with guilt upon her conscience," Thomas recounted, his voice a warm rumble beneath her ear. "That she had destroyed my letter to you 7 years ago, believing she protected me from an unsuitable attachment. But she had come to realize that happiness cannot be measured by social standing or fortune, only by the depths of love we carry for one another. She gave us back our lost years," Clara said softly. "Or at least, she gave us all the years still ahead. And there will be many years," Thomas promised. "Decades of loving you, Clara. Decades of waking beside you, of building dreams together, of growing old with my hand in yours." Clara raised herself on one elbow to look down at his beloved face. "When I was alone in this cottage, stitching seams by candlelight, I used to imagine what my life might have been if you had not left for India, if you had stayed and courted me properly, if we had married young and built our life together from the start." "And now?" Thomas asked, his hand rising to cup her cheek. "Now I realize that our story needed its years of separation, that we needed to grow into the people we were meant to be. That your success in India and my lonely years here shaped us into partners who understand the value of what we have." She smiled down at him. "I would not change our path, Thomas, because it led us here, to this moment, to this love." His eyes glimmered with emotion. "You are wiser than I deserve, and you are kinder than I ever dreamed of finding," Clara countered. "We are well matched, you and I, not because we are perfect, but because we see each other truly and love what we see." They held each other close as the rain continued its steady rhythm, a lullaby for two souls who had wandered far from each other only to find their way home. Years later, when their children asked how their parents had met and fallen in love, Clara would always begin the story the same way. "A letter arrived at midnight," she would say, her hand finding Thomas's automatically, "and it told your father I had been waiting for him all along." Thomas would add his own version. "The storm drove me to a door I did not know I was seeking, and when it opened, my entire life began." Their children would listen with rapt attention, never tiring of the tale, of the letter that crossed the distance between life and death, of the godmother who confessed her long-ago mistake, of the midnight knock that reunited two souls who had never truly been apart. But the most important part of the story was what they lived every day. The proof that love, when it is real and true and deep, cannot be destroyed by time or distance or circumstance. It simply waits, patient and steadfast, for the moment when two hearts can finally come home. And on quiet evenings, when Clara and Thomas walked hand in hand through Hartwell Park toward their beloved oak tree, they would pause at the place where he had carved their initials so many years ago. The carving had grown with the tree, stretched and weathered by time. But the letters remained clear, a testament to a love that had begun in youth and matured through separation into something unbreakable. "We found each other," Clara would whisper, her head on Thomas's shoulder. "We never really lost each other," Thomas would reply. "We simply took different paths to the same destination." In the end, that is what their story taught everyone who knew them. That love does not demand perfection or perfect circumstances. It only asks that two people see each other truly, cherish what they find, and refuse to give up, even when years and distance stand between them. A letter arrived at midnight, and it told her he had been searching for her all along. But the greater truth was this: They had both been searching across years and miles and misunderstandings, following the invisible thread that bound their hearts together. And when they finally found each other again, in a cottage doorway with rain falling and night deep around them, they discovered that some loves are written in the stars themselves. Unchangeable, undeniable, eternal. If this story of love found across time and distance touched your heart, we would be honored if you would share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us which moment moved you most. Was it the midnight letter that changed everything, the kiss beneath the oak tree, or the promise of decades spent growing old together? Subscribe to our channel for more Victorian love stories that remind us that true love never fades. It simply waits for the right moment to bloom. Like and share this video with someone who believes in second chances and the power of love to bridge any distance. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the mists of time to witness a love that refused to die. Until our next tale of hearts reunited, we remain your devoted storytellers at Victorian Love Stories.